our community, which plays into everything that we try and do anyway, which is a lot of community building. In addition to the plastic pollution prevention that we try and do, it is really about community building because that's where the prevention actually starts. So I always love speaking with new faces and not just the same people that we talk to all the time. So thanks again for inviting me. And yeah, as Marie said, I'm the executive director for Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii. I'm coming to you, for those of you who just joined, I'm actually in Cape Lookout State Park on the Oregon coast right now, camping. My parents live in Portland now, so I've been visiting them and now just trying to get away for a little bit and see a different stretch of coastline. There's marine debris on the coast out here too, not as much as in the picture behind me from Kahuku, but definitely still a problem that exists everywhere. And I did my master's at UH Manoa in natural resources management and worked with the Surfrider Foundation for 5 years after that, before I had been volunteering with Sustainable Coastlines for years before being asked to apply for the executive director position, which was previously held by Kahi Picaro. I don't know, does anybody know Kahi Picaro? Kahi is he's a legend of a human, and he started Sustainable Coastlines, like I said, 10 years ago, and has since moved on to an organization called Parlay for the Oceans, which I'll talk a little bit about later in some of the presentation. And he's still on our board of directors, but I feel very honored to take over an organization that has so much momentum, really, again, in building the community, but in extending the awareness about plastic pollution globally, because we really try and reach all audiences and help people understand that the solutions do not just lie with a single individual person, but with a much larger group, meaning all of us who inhabit this earth. So that's kind of the crux of what I'll get into. I guess I'm curious too. I'll share my slides in a minute here, but how many people before this had actually heard of Sustainable Coastlines or are really in tune with the plastic pollution problem in general? Oh, you're still on mute, Maurice.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say, I know myself, I know Charlene just gave the thumbs up, and I know Keith Greer also is very in tune with that. I'm not sure who else here, but.
Okay, I'll give some background information to that on just the problems, but as Charlene mentioned too, what she's really interested in is the solutions, not just the problems. So I'll definitely get to a more heavy dose of that later on. And Maurice, is it okay if I share screen?
Yeah, you should be all set to do so.
Okay, perfect. All right, is that showing up for everybody? Looks good. All right, beautiful. So yeah, just to kick off who we are, I mean, Sustainable Coastlines, our mission statement is inspiring local communities to care for their coastlines. And the way that we do it is we have a variety of different programs that we work on. And the one that most people know us for are very large scale beach cleanups. What Kahi started on was the idea that in order to bring people into an issue, we have to make it fun. So all of our beach cleanups are big festivals until the COVID times. In the past, we've gotten as many as 1,500 people together for a beach cleanup and cleaned as much as 40,000 pounds of debris in just one day. That was on Molokai, actually, at Mo'omomi, with just about 250 people. We cleared 40,000 pounds of debris, and it varies from site to site kind of on whether we're getting the really large debris or just the microplastics that we have to sift out of the sand. So we think of beach cleanups as fun, but then also it's the way to, we say, accidentally educate people. If people come to the beach and they don't know anything about plastic pollution, but they have fun, they have an experience with their family and their friends that brings them into it, there's the opportunity for them to then take the next steps and understand more of where the problem is actually coming from. And ultimately, that is our goal. We don't want to be cleaning up beaches for the rest of our lives. We want to have beaches that don't have plastic on them in the first place. And that's where we're trying to get to again, because I know probably for some of you who have been in Hawaii for a long time, the beaches that we see now covered in plastics are don't have to be the norm, and they weren't the norm in the past. So a couple other things that we do, we have a very, very strong education and outreach program in schools. And last year, we educated over 12,000 students in DOE schools, and that was across multiple islands. And we really try and focus in on Title I schools to bring students in who may not have as many opportunities to have these kinds of hands-on education experiences. So we have our education van that we drive around on Oahu for now. We're looking into, as we do more on the other islands, how we can bring our van with us and have those interactive experiences. And another program we do is actually called Sustain Events, and it's a waste diversion program where we've worked with the Triple Crown of Surfing for almost 7 years now with different festivals that are on the islands where we'll set up our waste diversion systems where we can then sort out recycling plastic that can either be recycled or has to be thrown away, and then compost also. And again, it's an educational piece that as people are coming to events, that they then understand where there is no away, really, we like to say, when it comes to waste. We try and explain how waste can be a resource and then also how it's a detriment. So that's a really good one when it comes to trying to stop things at the source. We work with the events to reduce their single-use plastic even from the beginning, so that there isn't any at events, and help them find the alternatives for that. And all of that is part of this whole idea of turning off the tap, that the real solutions start at the source. How do we actually stop plastic pollution before it starts? And it extends everywhere from what we do in our own households all the way up to encouraging policy decisions. And I imagine as a Rotary Club that you all work across the board on those things, whether it's just getting your hands in the sand for a volunteer event, or participating in anything from a neighborhood board to city council. All of those things are part of the solutions. So I think that there's some disconnect oftentimes too in just what plastic actually is, and why it's also such a big problem. So just in looking at some different ideas, we're not an anti-plastic organization. It's really the single-use plastics that we really try and focus in on a lot, because I mean, we think of something, plastic is made out of fossil fuels, and if we use it once and throw it away, it's not valuing the resources that we have in our world. And so plastic is actually made to be extremely durable, and the things that we reuse over and over and over again are often made out of plastic, but we have to treat it like that, as if it can be multi-use, and that it needs to also be designed in a way that it can be used again and again and again. And that's what we encourage from the business sector too, is focusing really in on that idea of multi-use and reuse. But this is also a disconnect that I see in communities in general about plastic, is that a lot of people don't know that plastic is made out of oil, essentially out of fossil fuels, natural gas and crude oil. And that is a big first step in awareness, in that as we're trying to move away from a lot of the climate impacts of fossil fuels, at the pace that we're going right now, the fossil fuel companies are doubling and tripling down on plastic production, because the demand for oil for vehicles is going down. So they're trying to figure out, well, how do we remain relevant? And at this point, by 2040, on our current trajectory, plastics would make up 20% of the entire world's fossil fuel budget. So, and that's only in production. That's not including the moving it around and shipping and what happens to it at the end. So that's a big awareness piece. And you see in this slide, nurdles, this is kind of what plastics start out, what most materials are made out of. They get formed into these tiny little beads, and that's how we make most of our plastic bottles. I mean, you name it, anything comes from these little pellets that are then formed into different types of objects. And the problem with these is they also spill out into the environment fairly easily too. So I got into a little bit of this. I mean, I think that we probably all know what the issues with a continuing dependence on oil are, from the beginnings of the extraction process to the malfunctions in rigs and shipping of it, and then the air pollution that comes with it. And something fascinating about plastics, there's actually a researcher, Sarah Jean Royer, who is a Sustainable Coastlines volunteer and worked at University of Manoa and at Scripps. And they found that as plastics are degrading in the environment, as they're hit by sun, they're actually releasing methane, the worst of the greenhouse gases. So it's kind of this crazy, like at the very beginning, we're talking about the problems from extraction of oil. And then at the end, as they get back into the environment, they're still contributing to the greenhouse gas problems. And so this gets into that a little bit too. What plastics photodegrade in the environment, they don't actually biodegrade. They just get smaller and smaller and smaller. So these pictures that you see in the top here are actually from Kailua Beach in January, where we had this huge microplastic event, and we cleared thousands and thousands of pounds. And I mean, just in this picture with the feet, there's probably 1 million pieces of microplastic throughout the sand layer there. And in the water, you can see this net is being scooped completely full of microplastics. And that is because of this problem of photodegradation, that as the sun hits it, the plastics are breaking into these smaller and smaller pieces. So a lot of people have questions about, especially in Hawaii, like where's all this plastic coming from? And the answer is a mix of many things. So from land, we see, it depends on which side of the island you're on. In Hilo, being a windward coast, oftentimes what washes up on our windward beaches and the southeast and northeast shores is marine debris. So I'll get to that in the next slide. But on our west side beaches, we'll see a lot of just litter or runoff that's coming out of streams and polluting the nearshore waters there. And this is a problem. I mean, globally, the major inputs of plastic coming out of rivers in Asia is astronomical. Looking at this picture here, I'll get more into that because I also don't want to blame other countries for the problems that we're also helping create. But it should be known that the problems come from us upstream. I mean, if you think of the Ahupua'a system and how things are interconnected throughout the entirety of our world, but very specifically in Hawaii, we have this very obvious ridge to reef vision that we can see how something that starts at the top of a mountain will end up in the ocean. And ultimately that is the plastic pollution problem in a nutshell too. So at sea, what we're encountering is a lot of derelict fishing gear. That's what we see mostly on the beaches in Hawaii, and that's because of the way that the plastic for those is made. It actually floats, and that's what we'll see. Whereas a lot of the single-use plastics, whether it's a water bottle that has its lid off, or a plastic wrapper, or a fork, or a spoon, all those things will sink. So we don't see them as much, even though we still end up with the bottle caps. And lighters, toothbrushes, all those things. The majority of the plastic that is in the ocean has actually either sunk to the bottom or is somewhere in the middle of the water column because of how its buoyancy works. And why Hawaii? Why are we? I mean, we are literally getting hammered with the world's plastics, and this is mostly the reason why. The Pacific Gyre, which is this, what a lot of people think of as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and ultimately it's not just one giant patch. There are patches of it out there, but it is mass throughout the Pacific. And the way that our trade winds and currents work, they bring, you can see by the arrows, it's coming directly into the east side beaches. And specifically the northeast side beaches is where it's the worst, with the exception of Camilo. So I think ultimately that this is the most important part is why should we care about plastic? I mean, sometimes people say, oh, it looks pretty. It's like confetti on the beach. I think that's kind of crazy, but you know, whatever floats your boat. But ultimately it's causing a lot of problems in our environment too. And the fascinating one that really still needs a lot more study is the actual effects of plastic on our health. And a lot of the chemicals that are in plastics have been connected to carcinogens, have all sorts of adverse health effects in animals in particular. And they've done studies of things like styrene, which is the main part of polystyrene foam that we know is styrofoam, that has heavy carcinogenic problems in it. It hasn't been tested as much within human health, but as we know, we are what we eat sometimes. And as plastics accumulate in the environment, and especially those microplastics, which are ingestible by everything from the smallest of fish or shellfish, even all the way up to our largest marine mammals that are filter feeders and are collecting them. And there's a double whammy there, that if we're eating those things, then we're most likely ingesting some of the chemicals from their tissue, because plastic actually bioaccumulates toxins in the ocean. So toxins are attracted to plastic because of its chemical makeup. And as that is absorbed, we are also then absorbing it in our food chains. And again, it can make, I think what I'll get into here is in terms of animals, aside from just our own human health, we know that almost all turtle species in the world are ingesting plastics or getting caught up in nets like you see in this picture. Fish samples from their belly contents are very common to see these little fragments of plastic in them too. And we know that seabirds are dying from plastics. If you've seen the imagery from Midway, with the albatross, when they ingest plastics, they can't actually digest it, so it just sits in their stomach, and then they end up starving to death. And same thing with even as large of whales. I've been to the Marine Mammal Center in Oahu where they did some necropsies of whales, and I saw the stomach contents that were filled with up to 30 to 40 pounds of plastic that had just been in their bellies. Okay, so all of the negativity aside, I think that it's important to understand how big of a problem it is, and again emphasizing too that it is continuing to accelerate. I mean, all the numbers are showing more plastic in the ocean than fish by 2050. Again, the problems with fossil fuels in there, and we have to figure out ways of what to do. And it's honestly going to take some very drastic changes in our lifestyles to slow this down. The Pew Research Group just put out a really fantastic paper that was released this year, describing scenarios for how do we actually get back to a level where there aren't plastics going into the ocean and accumulating there. And it is a full-on, like, we have to do everything in order just to reduce back to where we were 10 years ago. And so that's what I'll get into here, is what are all those things and how can we all be a part of those solutions too. So I think something really important to think about too is this idea of reactive versus proactive solutions. And in that Pew paper that was also published in the Journal of Science, they really get into this, that neither one is bad. Like, we should be doing both. Ultimately, if we want to free our world of plastics, we are going to have to continue to clean up what is already there. So that's still a reactive solution, right? If we just clean beaches like we do in Sustainable Coastlines with these large groups for the rest of our lives, we would be doing that for the rest of our lives and our children's lives and their children's lives. And so it's not actually getting at the source of the problem. But again, it is 100% needed too. So I think that this is another, in just dissecting some of the situation here too, and where we need to go, and just getting our minds around this. There's a myth that is perpetuated oftentimes by the plastics industry so that they can continue to do what they're doing and make millions, if not trillions, or trillions of dollars off of it. And that is that plastics are cheap and convenient. And it is not the industry's fault. The problem, it is the consumer's fault for not managing their waste correctly. That is 100% a myth. I would say that the fact in the end is that plastics are actually very expensive. They're extremely inconvenient. And most plastics are made in the United States or in Europe. And by made, I mean the companies that are responsible for them are either US or European based companies too. So just from volunteer hours in Hawaii alone, we spend about $1 million annually to clean up beaches. And California actually did a really interesting study on all of their coastal communities and estimated that $500 million is spent every year just to clean out storm drains and clean beaches from plastic pollution. And so while the plastics on the upfront might be cheap, the end cost is still what we're actually paying as taxpayers to have it cleaned back up. And so San Diego County, similar to the same population size as Hawaii, spent $13 million annually just to clean out storm drains and clean up beaches. And just to reinforce a little bit here too on some of these numbers of where plastic is actually coming from, and then this idea of the natural capital cost is incurring those cleanup costs, and also what it costs to make plastics before they're let go. 95% of plastics are used somewhere between 80 and 95% of plastics are in that single use range where we are losing almost all of this value of this product to the environment or to incineration or to landfills immediately after a first use, many of them used for 10 seconds to 5 minutes. And so the costs per year there are about $75 billion a year globally, that we're losing because of the way that we treat this material. And this other graph is just showing that most of the headquarters of all these plastics companies are in Europe. And while the production spans in both the US and Asia, again, the companies are sitting in this US and Europe. And at the top of that is Dow Chemicals and Chevron, Exxon. They're the companies that are leading the way in plastic production. So, all right. Again, that was still some of the negative sides of things, but I think that there's so much opportunity. And I think that one of the most exciting things that we see in all of our educational work is that there is a youth movement that is connected to the preservation and stewardship of our world going forward. I think that something like plastic pollution and climate change, especially in the millennial generation and the Gen Z, these are not political issues. These are part of our continued collective kuleana to really take action on making our world better, not just for ourselves, but for everybody into the future. And what's really amazing in the civics platform, which I've been much more involved in over the last 7 to 8 years, where I used to think politics are stupid. I hate all politicians. That was kind of my continued go-to before I even knew how to be involved. And what I realized is most people don't understand how to be involved and how to actually break down some of the power structures that we need in order to create change. And Bill 40 on Oahu was a really big moment. This was over 10 years of work from people who have been fighting against plastic pollution and really dealing with a lot of the industry influence on stopping some of these bills that are really just trying to get us away from these single-use items. And so Bill 40 was very comprehensive. It's phasing out things like polystyrene foam, utensils, plates, all these things that are the single-use items, and that's happening over the next 2 years. Starting in January of this year, there will be utensils upon request only, and if you want utensils, then we'll pay for utensils. And the idea ultimately behind this too, and especially the messaging, is we're not just trying to say you can't do this. It's a rethinking of how we live. And ultimately, most of those things that we're talking about are things, I mean, you think about utensils and you look in your drawer in your kitchen and you have probably 40 forks. That might be an exaggeration, but there's plenty of utensils in your drawer that even if you just took one set of those out and stuck them in your bag before you left, you would never have to take a plastic utensil from a takeout place. And I think that while that might seem small, this is the proactive side of the solution, that if we can all start doing that, if we all collectively as a community change our mindsets on that, then we have an opportunity to make really, really big changes. And getting involved. I mean, these students, this scroll here in this picture was signed by over 1,500 students that Dyson, who's at the podium of the city council there, collectively went from school to school and got students to sign on to this, and they unrolled this across the whole testimony room at Honolulu Hale, and it was really powerful. I mean, you can see that when kids are involved like this and understanding that they're talking about their future, that our leaders react in a different way. So I think that's part of why education is just such an important piece. And this is what I was just talking about too, the proactive solutions. You think about the different options. I mean, some of them we've been hammered with now at this point: a metal straw over plastic straws, the bags, which I know Hawaii Island has been without plastic bags for a long time. And I think that most people could probably have figured out a way to either bring their own or use paper. And again, using paper isn't what we're advocating for either. It's that reuse idea that will protect not just resources that are fossil fuel based, resources, but even when we think about trees and the water use that goes into making paper, again, it's the same thing in mindset. Like we shouldn't be using something once and then just getting rid of it immediately. So this is another piece that I'm really excited that Sustainable Coastlines is working on. And we, because of our waste diversion program that I discussed at the very beginning, we've gotten really interested in composting. And a lot of people are like, what does composting have to do with plastic pollution? Why are you guys reaching outside of your mission? And the answer is, it may seem that way, but absolutely not. We realize in doing the waste diversion how much food waste is lost. And on Oahu, we burn all of our food waste, almost all of it. Some of it goes to piggeries, but 30% of what goes to H-Power on Oahu is organic material that could have another life through composting. And the reason why I bring that up as part of the solution to plastic pollution is, if we start moving away from these single-use items, there's also going to be a surge in the compostable containers that come in. So that's one aspect of it. Currently, there are very few places that you can actually break down the PLA cups or the kind of cardboardy clamshells that we use for plate lunch. And we are bringing in a small scale industrial composting machine from this company, Green Mountain Technologies, and it's actually built into a 20-foot shipping container. And we're partnering with a local farm to test it out. And the idea is that we'll be able to compost some of those alternatives to plastic, but then it's also a place that we can partner with restaurants, schools to bring food waste. And the real solution in this that I'm getting at is that as we have so much fertile land in Hawaii that is going unused for local food production, and we have whole islands, I mean Lanai and Kaho'olawe, that are destroyed from whether it's bombing or from mass pineapple crops, these monocrops of pineapple and sugarcane, but there's still so much valuable soil that if we start composting more, we can regenerate soils. And in regenerating soils, not only do we create opportunity for at-home food growth, it's also the number one carbon sink that we can have on our planet. Healthy soils bring in more CO2 from the atmosphere than trees do. And so we kind of dually hit this. And ultimately, when we have created more space for growing food, the more food that we can grow at home, the less we have to rely on imports that are wrapped in plastic and are shipped from all over the world and again, causing lots of issues, both with climate change and the amount of waste that we're bringing into an island community, that we really have to think about how much waste we're creating too. So I'm really excited about this. We're going to be kicking this off in November, December. We should have the machine up and running in Waimanalo on Oahu. And ideally, what can happen with this is that we can create these small scale systems on all the islands where they're regionalized, so people can bring their compost to small farms or even businesses who have the space to host one of these machines. And yeah, really continue to work on that. That's, like I said, one of my favorite projects we're working on right now. So I think that just in wrapping up some of these proactive solutions too, there's social media also has an incredible power. Through Sustainable Coastlines, it was one thing that Kahi hammered on from the beginning. If we can tell the story of this, and even just you listening to this, if you learned something new on this, whether it's social media or any other form of communication with the communities that you have, by transferring information again and again and again between people, that exponential rise in understanding of what the issues with plastic pollution are and what the solutions are, that's how we get there. We can hit a tipping point. We can get to a point where enough people know about this that we can drive change much more rapidly than the way that we have right now. And that's, again, that educate community members part. I think that what I've realized too in this, being able to write to public officials and getting over the hurdles of people in government being untouchable or outside of the norm, they're not human. I think that they're people just like all of us. And the more and more I realize that as we develop relationships, just like we do in our community, we can have the power of bringing about change through that system too. I think also this is a big one, the talking to local businesses. There, especially during this time in COVID, there has been a lot of misinformation that has been spread about surfaces being contract or passing on the disease, and we have to be careful about reuse, and we can't bring our own bags, and most of that has been disproven. And then the second piece is that switching away from plastics is going to be costly to businesses. And again, this is such a challenging time for business. I am empathetic to that on the highest of level. And I think that that dialogue can also be changed. Like, this is an opportunity to save money. If we can get our community connected on this idea that we can bring our own almost everything, then again, we actually lower the costs of what businesses are buying, and especially with things like utensils, where I think we truly have the solutions at our fingertips now. And I think that that dialogue, it just is going to take a little mindset change to think about, okay, well, we actually have a way to reduce our costs and stop plastic pollution at its source. The last one that I also love, we partner with a lot of artists. So a lot of people will say, what do you do with all the marine debris that you collect? And unfortunately, a lot of it still, the problems are that it has to go to either a landfill or to an incinerator. And those have a whole suite of problems. Incineration, while it's billed as clean renewable energy, is actually one of the dirtiest forms of energy creation. It creates 3 times more greenhouse gas emissions than burning oil does, and about the same as coal does. And not to mention what comes out of the smokestacks when you're burning plastics, which have really toxic dioxins and chemical properties in them. Those are being released into the air too. And oftentimes, when I talk about social justice issues, places like landfills and incinerators are put in the most impoverished areas of communities. And so again, like the reduction of waste at the beginning is really where the solution will come in those things. And that was a long way of getting to. We also do try and find other things to do with the plastic that we collect. We constantly look for artists who want to make educational tools out of microplastic. Ethan Estes is an artist who we partnered with for the Triple Crown of Surfing, made a huge wave out of the nets that we collect on the beaches, and people could take pictures inside the wave. And it was, again, that accidental education. Oh, what is this wave made out of nets, and where do the nets come from? The commercial fishing industry. And so we got to tell those stories around a piece of art. And the other project that we're working on to, again, get away from the burning or the landfilling of what we find is an upcycling project with Parlay for the Oceans. So we are bringing in some technology in early 2021 where we'll be able to take the plastic marine debris and turn it into other things. Hopefully things that people will reuse over and over again. And what we'll do is we'll make sure that there's an opportunity for anything that we create, we can take back. And that's part of this idea of extended producer responsibility that we really want to lead the way on also. And I can answer more questions about that. I think, I think that this is wrapping it up is, it is going to be a challenge. And like I said, in that Pew article, they said we have to do everything. We have to stop production of plastics at the beginning. We have to clean it up at the end, and we have to do everything in between if we want to get to the place where our kids aren't walking on beaches that are covered in plastic and there's still animals alive that haven't swallowed them. So I think that I'm always learning. Every single day, there is something new that comes out about plastic pollution, about ways forward, and I'm always open and ready to take that in and willing. I think the big part is willing to change. I think that that's going to be huge for us going forward. Is it's so easy for us to just get stuck in our convenience in just certain ways of life, and I understand it. Everybody works their asses off every day, and so it's easy to not want to change, but this is going to take change if we want to stop it. And emphasizing again, sharing the knowledge that you have once you've learned it with others. And getting back to Kahi's thing is, I I love doing this because it is an opportunity to really build community, and it is really fun when you see people gathering around a cause, not to just make money on something, but truly to try and make the world a better place. And that's fun. And it's fun to watch people build off of that energy and make friends through this, but then also again, make that change. So I think throughout this, while you have to tell people about the negative consequences of things, the most important thing that we try and do is make things fun. And with that, I'm sad. We actually had planned our Hawaii Island cleanup for Sustainable Coastlines was supposed to be in November this year, and we were going to try and make it a multi-location cleanup from Waipio to South Point to Kona, and we're going to have to put that on hold because of COVID. But I really hope that in the future I'll have the opportunity to interact with all of you in person and work on this on the beaches together. And yeah, if you want to learn more, these are our social media, and it's just sustainablecoastlineshawaii.org is our website also. And we're constantly adding, we're actually just rebuilt our website and are going to be adding a whole lot more resources for people to get involved from afar, especially during this time, a lot more online learning for students. We're trying to figure that out on the go, really take listening to teachers on what's actually effective, teachers and parents both, who are obviously scrambling to figure out how do we still maintain a learning environment that kids can really engage with. And I promise you we're working on that too. So if you have teachers in your community who want to reach out, we have a education director also who does remote presentations and would be happy to engage with any size group of student, for now over Zoom, but in the future we also do week-long to 2-week-long education tours on all of the islands, and would be happy to schedule anything with teachers once we're able to do that in person again. So yeah, with that, I mean, mahalo for the time and listening, and I think I still left enough time to engage and have some questions too.
Thank you very much, Rafael. That was very informative. Yeah, just wonderful information. I wanted to ask you though, do you have a link to the Pew Research Group there to their findings or that report? Because I would love to look over that if you could direct me to that, or if you could share the link in the chat. Perhaps there might be others that would be interested.
Absolutely. Let me
email that out to the group.
Definitely can.
I know I have a bunch of questions, but beyond the Pew research, I will yield to anyone else who has questions that they would like to ask at this time. And remember, you're all muted, so unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question.
So what do you think of, this is Charlene, what do you think about those fusion blocks?
Great question. That's part of what we'll be doing with the upcycling also. It's a little different than bifusion. What we'll do is create building blocks in a different way through grinding and extruding process. I think it's a great idea. The beginning of it right now, I think that they should only be used for interiors, because as I mentioned before, as plastics interact with sunlight, as they're emitting methane, that's a huge issue. And also, as they interact with sunlight, they are breaking off smaller and smaller pieces of plastic. So I think that there is a wealth of opportunity going forward with them. And especially there's bioresins that are being tested right now too, so that you can coat them in a plant-based material that doesn't interact with the sun in the same way. And then for things like even building city park benches and picnic tables and playgrounds, then there's a big opportunity there.
Are there any numbers regarding the amount or what percentage of methane plastics are contributing to the atmosphere?
That's a good question. I don't think that it's been categorized yet, because the research that just came out it was only last year that that paper was published about methane, just knowing that methane is being released by plastics. So I don't think that there's nothing that I know of that is calculating the exact contribution of it in the greenhouse gas footprint.
You know, there's one thing that you had mentioned earlier concerning the ban on the plastic bags and how that was an easy thing to be done. But it was amazing to me how quickly it came back with COVID. They relaxed those laws, and immediately everybody had plastic bags, it seemed, like as if they were on a shelf just waiting to be used. I couldn't imagine that all these bags had been shipped in so quickly, but there they were. Is there any talk that you know of between government and distribution centers, et cetera, that as to how long they will relax that ban or when they will put it back into effect?
I'm not sure. I know that I don't think Hawaii or Oahu didn't relax theirs that I know of fully. Most of it is still paper at the store. I don't know. I know that some places, like in California, there were places that brought back plastics and then they said, okay, we're done. Especially because of like what I was discussing, the research came out that both the CDC and the WHO have said that there has been zero correlation of cases from surface transmission. So that was what the fear was at the beginning, that if people are bringing in their own bags, that it's going to be a potential transmission agent. And that's been pretty much debunked. And I mean, we could, under that logic, then everybody would have to come to the store naked because your clothes are the same as a cloth bag too. So I will tell, the plastics lobby is very, very strong. And so a lot of that information that's coming out is truly designed to scare people into the necessity for using plastics. And it's convoluted because the plastics industry is also providing a large service when we talk about those plexiglass screens, like the masks that are being used in hospitals. And again, that's why I said this isn't an assault completely on the plastics industry. It's just mostly on the single-use side of things and understanding the difference between necessity and then what we've been told is necessity.
Right. I have a question regarding incineration. Have you looked at any of our videos that we have on our website?
I have not, no.
Okay, so we had David Marquis speak. You might be interested in listening to him. He's from Puna Precious Plastics, and Maddie Larson from Upcycle Hawaii, as well as Bob Schaefer, who's an agronomist who is a consultant specifically predominantly for composting. So, and he runs very large composting projects. I think you would definitely love to get a hold of him and perhaps David Marquis and Maddie. But David Marquis was talking about a machine that was being used to extract oil from the plastic, and then that was used for energy generation, and that there was a boat that was running on that right now that was in the Pacific collecting all the plastics from the garbage patch. What is the difference between incinerating plastics and using some sort of extraction method to get the oil and using the oil for power production?
Yeah, great question. I mean, incineration is the way that a waste energy plant works is you just throw everything into a giant pile and burn it, and that energy is, the heat energy is then transferred. It's a much dirtier process than what you're talking about, which is like the pyrolysis or gasification systems. And it's so complicated in the times that we live in, because I've gone back and forth on that type of waste to energy also. Is it cleaner in the beginning? Yeah, they melt it to a point that it's not releasing the same toxins in that process of creating the oil. So it's contained also. There's no smokestacks in a gasification project. It basically chamberifies the process, and then you have your essentially a crude type oil that comes out, or a diesel type oil that comes out on the other end that you can use. You can put additives in to run, yeah, I mean, a truck, a boat, you name it. The Again, it's delaying the problems, I think, because your smokestacks from the waste to energy are visible where you know, on Oahu, you see the H-Power smokestacks and stuff coming out of the top of them. Whereas this, in that process of pyrolysis or gasification, you don't see that, but the smokestacks are in the tailpipes of your car or of your boat. And so whatever, you can't get rid of the toxins that plastics are made out of in those processes. So it's a real, I think that the problem now is that obviously we're still using fossil fuels to run vehicles, to run power in our homes, a lot of different things. And so if you can think of it as a stopgap, like maybe it's an opportunity. The problem that I see, and that oftentimes with this, both with that waste to energy and also even what we're working on with the upcycling of plastics, is when people start to think, oh, well, we can just do something else with the plastics. It's not a problem if we create it in the first place. That's the mentality that we want to make sure that we stay away from, in that this is not the solution. Like burning plastics for energy or taking plastic and making it something else that's plastic is not the solution for us going forward. Like when we talk about our upcycling, we were like, we want to put a 2050 going out of business slogan on our work already.
Right. Yeah, Charlene is saying, I don't know if you saw in the chat, our island has done a lot of renewable energy, composting, agricultural water, renewable energy, be hopeful, which is very true. Yeah, absolutely. You need to remain hopeful.
Even with governmental people.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a few minutes more. I want to make sure everybody has a chance to ask any questions. Now's the time.
So what do you do with the plastics we do have?
Yeah, it's a mixture of things. Like we have to send some things to the landfill, some things to H-Power, some things we try and upcycle. We've been collecting a lot of the marine debris so that when we launch our upcycling program, we have shipping containers full of marine debris that we don't want to send to incinerate or the landfill. Unfortunately, the solutions are not there, and that's part of the sad part about why, you know, we're dealing with a lot of the world's waste, and we collect it on these small islands and have to figure out what to do with it. I mean, we could say, oh, we should put it in shipping containers and send it back where it came from, but that in itself causes more problems with emissions too, and then it would just be lost to the environment again. So we do what we can for now, and like we work with artists too, is that's the best thing that we can do, is reuse it for educational pieces.
Yeah, I think you would love seeing what Maddie Larson's doing with the upcycling. So she does more usable products, like out of tires and plastic bags, using plastic sheeting and rope that's been fused, melted and fused together. Some really cool things like that, earrings and jewelry, etc. And then David Marquis is more interested in doing like paving bricks and maybe some building block bricks, stuff like that. He's experimenting with that. But I was curious, you were talking about how expensive plastic is, because we only look at the upfront cost for what does it cost to buy a plastic fork, or it's just a few cents, and typically we're not buying the plastic fork, a restaurant is, and we get it when we get to go and whatnot. But what if we had to pay for the true cost of plastic up front? What if there was a tax based on weight or based on the item, combination of factors, so that you can say the true cost of a fork is, I don't know, $3 because of what it takes to clean up, that plastic, and then one that puts the true value out there, so you see how much it costs, it deters people from paying that amount unless they actually have the money and can. And also, since they know how much it costs, they, instead of just throwing it on the ground, they make sure it gets to proper recycling or a compost. Are there any initiatives that in the pipelines that you've seen, any talk of doing something like that? I mean, I know it would get shot down from the plastic industry as well, as the plastic lobbyists are basically oil lobbyists, and they're monsters to go against. But have you heard anything similar to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen anything that really gets at the full costs of it. What we're proposing, I was working on the state plastic source reduction working group over the last year, and part of the recommendations are charging larger fees, whether it's 30 cents or 30 cents for forks or bags or whatever type of plastic takeout container that it is. Actually, any type of takeout container, so that we actually get more towards the reuse side of things. Again, like 30 cents, it's a deterrent most certainly, but it's not getting at any of that serious cost that we were talking about. I think the other issue with it too is that it's putting the burden on consumers who oftentimes don't have a choice of what they're getting, and that's the pain of this situation with the plastics industry, is they're making billions of dollars off of this. And so when the price then has to raise for consumers, that's not the extended producer responsibility idea that we're really trying to get at, where ultimately the trillion-dollar companies should be the ones bearing the cost of the production, the cleanup, all of this, and not the people who have no other choice in what they're getting at the store. And again, like, there is the choice of bringing your own and some alternative products to plastics. But I mean, most restaurant owners are going to say, we don't want to raise the prices on our consumers more, or we're a small business, we can't afford these changes in costs either. So I think it works to an extent. Like I said, there's also a pay to play idea on the back end for our cities and counties, so that it reduce the size of the garbage cans that we have. And if you fill up more cans than your small one, then you pay per, so you start understanding what the actual cost of waste is. And that has very much proven effective in a lot of cities around the US, that the more people are charged for their waste, the less waste that they will create.
We don't have collection here.
Yeah, see, and that's, I don't have it on my street anymore either. So
yeah, we definitely need better waste management systems.
Do you have, can I ask, I know it's weird at the end, do you have any program for like civic organizations to just take hold of it and say, listen, this is what you can do. This is how you can mobilize at least your organization. You can't change the world. You can start with the young ones, but in the meanwhile, for the 2-year out factor, do you have a plan? Like, okay, you use this type of thing, and just have it so it's like a checklist. A lot of people don't have the capacity or interest actually to do everything unless it's motivated by a larger organization like Rotary. So like the Keith right here that's on the screen, he's worked, he's passionate about sustainability and all the issues. The question is, how do we roll something out that's specific for our island only? We can't be worried about anybody else at this point. We've got enough stuff to deal with. So do you have something already that through your educational program that you did with the kids? Is there something for the adults, for civic organizations?
that's a great idea. Nothing like you're talking about, like a checklist, which I think that I would really like to put together. We've been talking about doing a menu of items within our waste diversion program very specifically. But I think expanding it out to, you're right, just like a 1-page check, and then here's the resource to go and act on that. We have a lot where if there's a civic issue that comes up that we're interested in, then we send out a lot of like, okay, this is the time when you need to get your testimony in, here's some of the talking points. We definitely do those, but not just like what you're talking about, it's the ongoing checklist of ideas.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
And can you put, I'm going to take a picture of you, but can you put, I'm not sure how to do this, because I wanted to get the big wave that you had on your last PowerPoint. I don't know how to do that. Unless you can just send that to Maurice.
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Oh, it's the wrong one.
Yeah, that's the Pew one.
Yeah. Where did I go?
Because that was a nice one, and you wouldn't pay attention unless you were looking at it.
What,
I had a
the
check.
rope?
No, the rope
Yeah, the
wave.
rope wave. Yeah.
Oh,
That was great because I think
Yeah.
we have an artist here, Ono, Ira Ono, and he does trash art, and he's been doing it for decades. And I think it's a great idea. Oh, right there, perfect. Okay, if you can take that down, yeah, perfect. Nice. Okay.
yeah. And I think that's Kelly Slater in that one.
Okay. Let me get you in it too. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah,
Got
of
it.
course.
That's nice. I like that.
Yeah, it's an incredible piece. It's actually at the Bishop Museum right now.
Oh, nice. Okay, good idea.
Well, with that, we are definitely over time. Thank you so much, Rafael. Really wonderful presentation, and I look forward to talking to you more. I do have a few more questions. I'll send them to you via email sometime in the next day or two.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you
Everybody
very
feel
much.
free to reach out.
Yeah, have a safe trip.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it.
Bye, Deb. Bye, Lonnie.
Aloha,
Bye.
everybody.
Everyone, have a great week.
You're going to do the four-way test.
Oh, yeah, four-way test. Yeah, yeah. The four-way test are the things we think, do, or say. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair?
Is it fair to all concerned?
All
Right?
concerned
Third, would build goodwill and better friendship.
friendships.
Fourth, is it beneficial to all concerned?
No concern, right? There's one that's doubled up.
And
Good one.
fifth,
Fifth, have fun. Have fun. Okay, bye.
everyone.
Bye.